21 Grams is back, and welcome to the third iteration of our show. And in this iteration, we are offering a one-on-one interview with indie artists, and we're going to examine three very specific aspects of the creative soul. The cerebral, which will be all about the chess moves and deep thoughts that go into the aspects of the work and creating the work. The emotional, which will be all about the investment the artist has made in the work and creating it. And the practical, which will all be about the application of common practices, tropes, and ideas. In this season premiere, we are excited to welcome Glen Dahlgren, who is an indie author of epic fantasy and an RPG game creator. That being said, I'm your host, Joe Compton, and let's get deep into it. Here now is a new episode of 21 Grams. Yes, hello. Well, welcome to 21 Grams Season 3. I'm real excited about it. I'm real excited to have Glen join us for the first episode. It's awesome. He just released a new book. So we're real excited to talk to him about all of those things and more. And I just wanted to mention right off the top that, yes, this is designed as a question and answer kind of show, but we'll work in your comments. So if you've got comments, please do feel free to comment. And also, if you have questions, so I'll work those in as well as we go along. With that being said, hello, Glen.
Hi there. Thanks so much for having me on. It's been a while since we've had a chance to chat, and I love coming on here and talking to you about everything.
The first book, I think, actually. We do well, maybe we kind of talked in the second book, but yeah, it's been a while. Tell everybody a little bit about your world and yourself as well, please, sir.
Well, sure. So I'm a game designer from way back. I worked on some pretty big games like Star Trek Online and Unreal 2, and although those are they're not new, but they were big in their time. Wheel of Time, I think, was an interesting game because it saw a slight resurgence because of the TV show that came out, and in fact, I did a show on the Wheel of Time called The Dusty Wheel, and when I did the show, right after, I got a call from the executive producer from the TV show, and he wanted to let me know that he wanted to re-release the game. And so I couldn't say anything about it for the longest time, but I worked with him, I worked with the developer, and we got it done, got it out, and did a big celebration. So that was really cool. And I'm in talks with him. You know, he's a guy who makes fantasy series into TV shows, and that's not a bad conversation to have.
Yeah, it's always good to have a network, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually just shipped him out my books today, so that'll be cool. I also worked with like Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman on the Deathgate Cycle books, and Piers Anthony on Xanth, and Terry Brooks on the Shannara game. So I've got a lot of experience with fantasy, even while making games. And so every game that I made was all about storytelling. That's what drew me to those games. A lot of them were adventure games, and that's what adventure games are. It's all about storytelling. And after I did Wheel of Time, I had this idea for another game, but I asked myself, is it really a game? And it wasn't. It was a book. And so for 20 years, in the background, I worked on this book, and then I released it, and it was my first book, The Child of Chaos. And actually, it just won another award. It first won the gold medal for a reader's favorite, and just within like the last week or so, it won the American Fiction Award for epic high fantasy. So that's pretty cool. It's really cool that my debut continues to get recognized, because you never know. You know, you put yourself out there, you've never done it before, you don't know who's going to respond to it, and so the thing about it was, when I wrote it, I like blew up the world at the end, because that was a story that I saw. I wanted to set up this really harsh world, and I wanted to have an end to it and have them working towards it and then blow up the world. Well, but I like the world, and so did a lot of other people. And so I thought, okay, well, a lot of people actually really, really like this one character. And so I went ahead and wrote the prequel to that one, so I could still play in that world as it was, about Dantes, a warrior priest. And people seem to respond to it. So it just won the reader's favorite gold medal, and it also won the Dante Rossetti first place for YA fantasy. Nice. So that's I mean, a lot of this is new, so I'm still kind of reeling over the fact that it got these awards. But then it came to the fact, okay, I really have to deal with the fact that I blew up my world, because I've been calling it a series, so it should be a series, right? Yeah. And so I decided, all right, I did a lot of thinking about where I want to take the world, but I had to set it up in the prequel. And so I took all the work I did in the prequel, all the work I did in Child of Chaos, and I finally released House of Prophecy. And so that is like what happens after the prophecy that says the world is going to end. What happens next? And that's what this book is all about. And I'm really proud of it. I think it might be one of the best books I've written. It's definitely the longest at 120,000 words, which you don't see very often for YA fantasy. So so far, people seem to really like it. They've been giving it great reviews. And just 2 days ago, I wrapped up the audiobook. I finished editing. Oh my God, I make it so hard on myself making the audiobook. It's like no one, I think, would believe the crap that I put myself through for the audiobook, because I come from video games, and when I'm directing video game, I want it all to be perfect. Right. And so I will make my voice actors give me so many takes of something just because they're in there now, they're in the studio now, but they won't be in tomorrow. So I might as well get it now so I get the take I want. Well, I put the same pressure on me when I'm recording my audiobooks. So the raw material is crazy. It's got multiple takes for like every line, and it takes me forever to edit it down. When you hear it, it sounds like I'm just perfect. I just read it perfectly, but I'm telling you, it's nothing like that. It's a lot of work to get there. So I'm really happy to be done, and now it's in the hands of ACX, and hopefully they'll pass it through, and that'll get released very shortly. That's an interesting idea too. And Lily says you're incredible, Glenn. Lily is incredible. Lily is incredible. That's an interesting idea too, because like people don't realize. People just think that it's just like somebody's just reading it for 2 hours and it's all good to go. But maybe somebody does that. I don't know. Maybe someone's that good. I'm not that good. But voice acting is a craft. It is an art form, and there is a lot to it. And the way that you do it is typically how it's done. They always say it's usually for every hour of recording, it's 2 hours, or every hour that you hear is 2 hours of recording or 2 hours of work to get to that spot. I would be overjoyed if it were 2 hours of work. Mine's way more than that. I swear, I think 90% of the time is editing. Wow. Yeah. That's crazy. Yeah, it really is. It's way too much time. I mean, I probably shouldn't. I should be willing to accept something that's not that. That's not what the product that I end up with, but I just can't. If I can do it, I want to do it. I had a real hard time. I had a narrator. I had a real hard time with it. It was actually something that I struggled with, because like hearing it took me a while to kind of get the idea. And I come from the world of film, so it shouldn't have been this hard, but for some reason I really held on to a lot of things that I really shouldn't have held on to, and it took a lot of like friends and family just kicking me in the face and saying, hey, look, you got to just let this guy do what he's going to do. He's an artist. And and then once I accepted that, it was pretty easy to get through it. But it was like the initial, it's your baby. You want to, you want to nurture it. You want to make it, you want to keep it safe. And yeah, it's hard. I know exactly what you're saying. And there was a point when I was considering having a narrator do it. And then, of course, I said, no, this is too much fun. I can't let them have the fun. And, being an indie author, you want to make sure that ROI works out. So there's no better way to make sure that works out except doing it yourself. I had a lot to learn, and it was really scary. but I went ahead and did it. But I knew that I would be putting someone through the same hell that I'm putting myself through, because I wouldn't accept it. And nobody knows my material. Nobody knows my characters. Nobody knows the voices that I would attach to these characters, or the inflections. And if one inflection is off, it bugs the hell out of me. And there are a couple in there where I'm like, was I tired when I recorded that or something? How did I not miss the fact that I said the wrong name? And and it happens. It happens. Then I'll have to go back and re-record. But I can do that because it's me. If I had somebody else do that, I think he would hate me by the time we were done. So better I'm tormenting myself than somebody else.
Yeah, my narrator and I, we don't speak very often anymore. But I mean, we're still he's always open to do stuff for me. It's just, it was one of those things where you had to get through the rough patches,
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm real excited to have you especially do this iteration of what I'm trying to do here, because I think you have a unique perspective in the way you approached this world, as you were just talking about, certain elements and certain aspects of things made you change mindsets or do something differently. And I'm kind of curious to kind of get going here with the broader strokes, with the elements of moving one story to the next story, or moving even backwards in story. What were some of the harder elements for you to kind of tackle that you kind of worked through to get to point A to point B, actually really point A to point minus A to point C, kind of idea. I mean, what were some of the more bigger challenges for you that you really took on and felt like really made this series complete?
So, well, the series is not complete, by the way. I'm moving on, and you'll see that I've set myself up pretty well. I mean, it's obvious there is another book coming at the end. That said, I like the way that I write, in that every book is its own story. So I don't think of it in terms of, or at least I didn't think of it in terms of a series before. Obviously not. I thought it was going to be a one shot, and I turned it into a series. And more power to the people who have outlined everything and they know exactly where it's going. And that's great. Although I think that this world is really ripe for exploring. It's got a lot. I don't know that it always did. And in fact, so when I wrote Child of Chaos, I don't think it was obvious where things were going to go at all. But later iterations, it was just a sort of a minor thought that I had in one of the edits, and I included that, and that kind of became the basis of the next book. So it was a core. It wasn't a core idea, but it ended up being so powerful. And I don't know if you read the books or not, but it's the concept of the dreaming, which is sort of this. The people who are drawn to chaos have access to this other world that's kind of whatever they make of it.
Yeah.
Galen has to actually confront things about himself in the dreaming, and that wasn't part of the original edit. There was none of that. But once I started realizing the potential of and what it meant, what was the dreaming, what did it need, and that's actually kind of really important in House of Prophecy. So I explored a lot of that in House of Prophecy, and I will be going further in the next book in that direction. I did worry a little bit, though, because I set up this world that it was very rigid, and people liked that. People liked the gods and the temples and the aspects of order, and you were either drawn to a temple or you weren't. You were either a priest or a faithless, and the faithless lives were horrible because they had to tithe, and if they didn't tithe enough, then they would get auctioned off to a temple. It's really bad for a lot of people. And I was saying things about society with this as my example, but and I was able to explore more of that in Game of War, but I didn't have that anymore. But what I had was, in House of Prophecy, I had the remains of that. What happens when everything that you have relied on for thousands of years is suddenly gone? And, some people are going to resist that. Some people are going to pretend like nothing changed. and are going to be very violent about making sure that everybody believes that. So it ends up being really interesting about how people dealt with this. But also we have this new, lore. I don't want to give too much away.
Yeah.
But the way that Child of Chaos ended created problems with the prophecy, and that created problems with the world. And so the stakes, of course, the stakes in all of my books are so high. The world's going to end if things don't happen. But you learn a lot more about this world. I learned a lot more about this world in this book. And it's like, I don't know, just talking about process. I don't know how other people do it. I don't even know what my book is about until halfway through. I can't imagine writing a book in less than a year. It takes me that long to marinate those ideas and themes and come out with the product that I want at the end. More power to anybody else who's producing a book a month. I think that's fantastic. It's you're serving your audience. I wish I could come up with the books that I write in a shorter period of time. I just can't. And so, yeah, it takes me a while. I have a lot to say, but it takes me a while to figure out how to say it.
Anita wanted to make a comment about asking her narrator to redo stuff. That's pretty funny. I didn't feel bad about that. What I felt bad about was the way I went about it, actually. But yeah.
I have that issue with my cover designers. I use Mibble art out in Ukraine, and I feel I started, and everybody does this. All authors have this problem. They will get what they get, and then they'll be like, well, it's not quite what I want, but I guess maybe it's good enough. And I try to tell all of them that is not, at least not what Mibble art is all about. They want you to be happy. You have unlimited changes until you get there. Feel free. Now, you don't have to be nasty about how you ask them, but you should not accept something until you are absolutely satisfied with it. For this book, we tried my first concept, and it didn't work. And in fact, when someone just said the words, "It looks like a werewolf book," I'm like, crap, you're right. Scrap it. Going back to zero. And that's sometimes what you got to do. And then I ended up in an entirely different direction. You wouldn't say this is a werewolf book. And it's not. So I think, it does make sense, especially in the indie world. Have your vision and stick to it. And it should pay off. It'll at least be, it'll reflect you well, as long as that doesn't get in the way of marketing. Because you don't want, something that's really important to you, but not important to anybody else be on your cover. And that's kind of what happened with my first cover. It was more about me than it was my market. And they don't want to do that either.
Yeah, I remember the first cover and how it's changed and the evolution of it. And I think we talked about that the last time we actually spoke. But I as somebody who marinates, I'm kind of curious. What are you marinating more on the broader strokes, or are you marinating on it's like for you, do Easter eggs and like smaller details spark a little bit more creativity, or do you feel like those are the harder things to kind of those are the happy accidents that happen kind of idea?
The happy accidents can turn into big changes in where I'm headed. And so, yeah, in game design, it's kind of like that too. In fact, I will have design conversations with people, and I'll make a joke, or someone else will make a joke, and we realize the truth in that joke. And sometimes the inspiration and genius in that joke. Yeah, you think it's funny, but wouldn't it be really cool if we tried that? And so, that happens in story development too, as well. It's like, what would be the worst thing that could happen here? And, that would be interesting, wouldn't it? So yeah. And sometimes, honestly, I get really upset with myself when I don't know what's coming up next. It's like, I feel like I should. And I know you never know where the idea is going to come from. I had a boss back at Legend Entertainment, and he always said, the fear is that you'll go to the well and it'll be dry, because you never really know where the well leads. You don't know, what's coming up.
Yeah.
And so if you can't predict it, it's hard to rely on it. So sometimes I get frustrated. I don't know. I on every single book I have said, I really wish I could travel forward like 6 months and read my book and tell, what's my ending. And so I can just write it. But the truth is, like, especially House of Prophecy, the ending is the strongest that I've had in all 3 books. People have been reacting really strongly to it, and like emotionally, it's definitely one of the strongest endings I've had. So I'm really proud of it. But man, it took a while to get there. It took actually weeks where I couldn't write at all. I didn't know what I needed to do, but I finally got there.
So does that make the Easter eggs and details when somebody finds them and when they read it that much more satisfying for you? Do you go, oh yeah, cool, they caught it?
Yeah, I specifically because I think there are a lot of those kinds of things because I draw a lot on the previous books.
Yeah.
So there are lots of characters and events that if you are really familiar with those things, it makes it that much more meaningful moving forward. Yeah. If not, it's fine. You'll do fine. It's not a test. But, knowing that this character said that thing or, felt that way back when, like I'll say that in Game of War, it is a prequel. It's a standalone prequel. But I would say like a majority of those characters show up again in House of Prophecy. And you get to see, what has happened since Game of War. And it's really interesting.
Awesome. So that being said, with you mentioned earlier that the audience kind of gravitated toward a character, but was there a character for you that you had to work really hard at to kind of create their arc? Do you feel like there was one that was really satisfying and rewarding in the end that you were able to figure it out and move it forward?
Well, when I started, remember, it was 20 years ago, I started Child of Chaos. And I have to admit, I start with plot and world. I don't start with character. And I know that about myself. And so I have to make sure that I do the work for those characters. But I didn't when I started Child of Chaos. I kind of knew who these people, I knew that they were there, but I didn't know that much about them. And I didn't care that much at the time. So Galen, who is my main character, I got to know really well. But I would say the one that I'm most proud of is Horus, who is the villain. So he was a movie villain when he first appeared in the book. He was there to provide a foil to the protagonist. I didn't know who he was, and then I found out, and I was scared of him. He's a nasty guy, and he has reasons to be nasty that show up in the book now, in ways that you're like, oh, now I get it. And in fact, some people say they have identified with him, and I don't get that at all. I'm scared of those people now. But he is absolutely interesting. I mean, he's actually probably more proactive in the book than Galen is. And he's really kind of smart. I mean, the way he goes about things. And you're almost worried up until the end that maybe he could pull it off.
You mentioned that you, from book 1 to book 3, you've kind of grown as a writer as well. What do you notice the most about how you write and the differences between 3 and 1?
Oh, I mean, the fact that I can do a book in a year instead of 20 that's a big step up. I think that I understand my process a little bit more. I knew I did it, but I didn't really understand how I was doing it. I still don't follow a formula for my books. I kind of figure out what I need the story to be, and then I sort of make that happen. And I probably do have a formula in my head that I'm following that I just don't know. I know that there's going to be traveling. I know that there's going to be people need something, they need to get something or someone or whatever. I know that stuff tends to happen in my head, but I really don't know, where the story is going to lead me. And I certainly don't have a formula sheet that this is going to happen here, this is going to happen here, this is going to happen here. I kind of think that maybe there are acts. I kind of know where all is lost happens, and and how that's going to wrap up. And I do sort of have an epilogue, where I'm wrapping things up. So I kind of do that, but I think that, so I'm not a pantser and I'm not a plotter, or I'm not an outliner. I'm kind of a combination of both. I have to have the outline before I start. I can't write unless I know where I'm going. But I do a lot of seat of the pants outlining for individual chapters. So I need to know what that is, but I don't know until I get there. I kind of know where I need to get to, but I have no idea what specifically is going to happen until I get there. Unless it's a big scene, then usually I've been visualizing that big scene for a while.
I contend that most of us are in the hybrid category in that respect. Because even if you're outlining, you're a detailed outliner, and more so, the outliners are probably more of the outliers. They have a process and they stick to their process and they stick to that. But I do contend that with and we're going to get into the emotional aspects of things. I think with the emotions and things like that, it's impossible not to be moved and changed by that aspect of it. And I think because we're human beings and we deal with emotions on a daily basis, you do pants every aspect of that idea.
I might have brought this up before with you, because it's sort of something I realized really early on in game development, and that is discovery is really important. So if you find that something is fun in a game, you don't ignore that. You actually make that help drive your design, because if you just are trying to barrel towards something that you think is going to be fun at the end, you're really hoping for the best. But if you find something that's fun, even if it doesn't necessarily match your original vision, it doesn't matter. That's fun. You want that in your game.
Yeah.
And so the same is true of writing a book. Discovery has to be part of the process. If you and I'm sure a lot of people, probably more than me in this way, but the characters are going to talk to you. They're going to tell you what they think should be happening and how they would react. Like there's a scene in House of Prophecy where Galen is kind of being an ass, and he's kind of looking out for himself a lot. And Myra blows up, and part of it was because she was telling me, "Come on, I've let this guy get away with a lot. He's just done this thing. He really needs to be held accountable." And I'm like, you know what? You're right. Do it. Blow up at him. And I had people tell me, where did this come from? It's like, it's crazy. And part of it was my own emotional reaction. I'm like, this guy needs to be told off, because he's been doing this whole book, and now he needs this comeuppance. So then I massaged it a little bit, so it doesn't, it's not quite the sore thumb that my first draft was. But, my characters were telling me what needed to happen. And if you don't listen to them, you do so at your peril.
Yep. Yeah. As a marinator, I am as well a marinator. I do a lot of that. I do a lot of, thinking about the thing before me and the thing in front of me. And, I'm oftentimes, the one thing about my writing that I often is not about my life is that I'm hardly ever present. I'm either thinking about the future or the past, which is not me. It's not who I am as a person, which is kind of interesting that I use that aspect of it. In doing so, I get struck a lot. Do you find you get struck a lot by emotional moments, or do you find that you reflect a little bit too long on certain scenes? Does it ever stop you in your tracks a little bit?
It has. I don't know if it does often. Some scenes that I think I will reread my own scenes if they're special, and it will impact me every time I read those scenes. There was a case, and this was really early on in my writing. It was with Horace. I came up to his chapter, his first POV chapter, and I knew what he was going to do in that chapter. I'm like, I can't write this, because I hate it. I hate him. I hate how he's making me feel. And so it took me a while to get to a place where I could write it. So yeah, absolutely, my writing affects me emotionally. And there are moments when I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe this happened. Usually in a good way.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes not.
Are you more cognizant of that now as you've been writing a little bit longer, or do you feel like it just comes out of the blue for you?
I think that this sort of thing has been happening to me my whole life. And the way I used to talk about it in terms of game design is you have that aha moment when everything sort of comes together, and you just know when something's right, and you live off that for a while. It's like, oh my god, I can't believe I put it all together, and it's so perfect and so elegant, and it just makes so much sense, and it's so much better than anything else could be. And actually in design, it's like, if you come up with a design solution like that the first test you apply to it is, does it solve more problems than it causes? And the same is true of story. If you're trying to think of story options, does it solve more problems than it causes, is the first thing you have to ask yourself. And the thing, if it's like not only solves it, but it's elegant in how it solves it and actually makes more things possible, that's when you're like, oh yeah, yeah.
I'm curious for you dealing with readers and beta readers and the like. What do they like to talk to you most about? What moments stop them the most? Is it the funny moments? Is it the reveal moments? The deaths? The loving moments? What do they want to talk to you most about?
Well, I have to say that I don't use a lot of beta readers anymore. I did for like Child of Chaos. I got a lot of feedback, and it really depended on the people. Some people reacted to sort of the big moments. I mean, that was back when I kind of really, really wanted. I needed validation from my readers about the way that I was approaching it, because I'd never done it before, and so I wanted them. I asked them. I sent them lists of questions. Tell me everything you can tell me about these characters, about the events. What did you like most? What didn't you like the most? And I realized I was mostly doing that for me and not the process. I don't think I got as much out of it that changed the book. And so I stopped doing that. And so now what I tend to do is I have just a few alpha readers, and I just want someone to validate that it's a book, that, I put these words together and it makes sense, and, we're good to go. And I get some feedback that, I absolutely appreciate hearing, and I will not be doing that. Other feedback, validates the choices that I make, and I love. Obviously, I'm an author. I love hearing when people like stuff. But mostly, it's when my editor gets a hold of it. She is a YA fantasy editor, and she has. I mean, the fact that she's a woman is really important. I mean, it just is. She has a perspective that I don't. I'm not a woman, and I need to make sure that I'm not doing anything that I shouldn't do from her perspective. Also, she has more experience in YA than I do, so I want to make sure that I'm not breaking any boundaries that I'm not even aware exist. So she has given me like 2 or 3 areas in each book that were absolutely dead on. We're like, this relationship, I need to understand why this relationship works. So I need more information about moving that forward. And so I have really, and sometimes it's not even like a lot of writing to give her what she asked for. It's just, but it makes so much sense at the end having that there. So that's normally what I do is I listen to her.
For people who don't know, it's Miss Lily Lucchese who does most of the stuff. And yeah, she wrote a 9-book series that kind of blew up her own world a little bit too. So, so yeah, she would be an expert on blowing shit up for sure. So when readers come back to you with those moments, what moments do you want to gravitate towards most? Do you like the funny moments, the loving moments, the deaths? What do you find most satisfying in your process?
Yeah, I think it's the big moments, the big plot. Everything changes after this moments. I tend to lead up to those, and then everything explodes. And if I'm lucky, those are emotional moments as well. because they are. I think I have, as a writer, let the characters drive those moments more than the world and the plot now, because I really want them to. I want them to be involved, and I want them to happen because they made choices that were based in who they are. And in some cases, it's not the best choice for them, but they felt like they needed to. And actually, like in Game of War, it's like I feel like every choice that Dantes made in Game of War absolutely works from his perspective, and yet he keeps having problems because of them. And he lists them all at the end. He's like, I suck. Look at all these things that I did, and why are you even listening to me anymore? Why would you take a command from me? And then the person that is with him explains, no, here's why you did those things, and this is exactly why we're listening to you. So I appreciate the fact that these characters can be flawed and vulnerable and lead you places that maybe I think you agree with them at the time, but understand why they ended up in terrible places. Those are fun for me. Those kind of moments.
So I'm curious, you're an avid sci-fi fantasy reader, and I'm kind of curious. That there's tons of tropes out there. That there's in game design, there's a ton of tropes because that's the way it has to work. It doesn't go from A to B without troping a lot of those aspects of it, because the person that's playing the game wants it to go to that point because they know that they've succeeded at that point. I'm kind of curious, what is your personal favorite trope? What do you look not to use, but just you personally? What do you like in what are tropes that you really gravitate toward?
I honestly, I don't know. I mean, you have your sort of coming of age trope. You have your villain to friend trope. There's a bunch of them out there that I could point to that I enjoy reading if they're done well. And really, that's kind of what it comes down to. A trope can be a trope without being cliche, as long as it's executed well. So it really depends on the writer. If they handle it. I mean, there's a reason that a trope is a trope, and that's because people like to read those things. They are emotionally satisfying to get to the conclusion of them.
Yeah.
So you can do that. You can do that all day, every day, and still people will read your stuff as long as you're really adept in how you pull it off. So I can't tell you I have a favorite trope. In my own writing, I try not to do that. And I don't know that it's to my benefit. Honestly, it probably would be better if I did, because then I could just hang my hat on it and say, I know the emotional reaction that's going to happen here because I've set myself up for it. It would be more of an equation and a formula at that point, which again, is not a bad thing for a lot of writers. It's just, I kind of know where I want to go, and a trope doesn't usually help me get there.
Does one pop up, or one that you can't avoid that you just get through it? You just go, okay, it's going to be there. So fuck it.
I think someone else would have to tell me, what tropes they see in my writing, because I haven't identified them there. I know I'm sure they exist. I mean, I'm not creating everything from whole cloth. So, there is the special one, I suppose. Although it's not the one you think,
right,
when you're in Child of Chaos. So there is that trope. But yeah, I don't know.
There's a lot of, I mean, as somebody who's read Child of Chaos, there's a lot of mentoring in that book. There's a lot of, like, you think that this person's going to be the mentor, but this person really isn't. There's a lot of, it's like self-discovery journey. A lot of the hero's journey that isn't, and then you realize that that's not what's going on.
Yeah, it was. I've heard people apply hero's journey to Child of Chaos, and that makes me scratch my head a little bit.
Yeah,
I'm like, I know what the hero's journey is. I don't think this is it. And I've said this before, honestly, that Galen is on a journey, but he's dragged there a lot of the time. And I actually thought for a long time that was sort of a flaw of the book. He should have been more proactive. But again, that's where the story really wanted to go. I put a lot of power into the villain's hands. Yeah. He's the one with the idea. He's the one with the quest. And so he's making mountains move, and Galen is just like, "What the hell? I'm trying to catch up here. I keep getting thrown into pits and things, and Yeah, lots of bad stuff happens to Galen. But so I didn't consider him to be a hero's journey at all.
Mhm. Yeah, it's you kind of use it for the aspect of kind of subverting.
Maybe, yeah, maybe subverted, maybe throwing it on its head,
Yeah.
because it's definitely, yeah, this is not a hero's journey.
So when you do sit down to write, are you a routine writer? Do you sit down with do you have a goal in mind, or do you just stream of conscious? How do you approach it when you are in active writing mode?
So I'm not disciplined at all. I suck when it comes to that. I wish I were more disciplined. I probably should work at becoming more disciplined. But if I don't know what I'm writing, I can't write. I mean, I will sit there and I'll stare at an empty page for a while. And I've done that. I've tried to write when I wasn't sure, and I
Hmm.
had to rewrite it all. And because then I became sure, and then I was like, oh, that's not it. That's not what needs to happen. So it's not useful to me to write every day.
Hmm.
I usually try to work every day on making forward progress, and sometimes that works and sometimes that doesn't. I'm not a stream of consciousness writer, but I do, and I don't have a lot of tools. I mean, I don't have like you know uh, like little post-its, a board full of post-its, or even a virtual board full of post-its. What I have is the same thing I've always had in adventure game design, which is a walkthrough. I have a list of the things that happen from beginning to end, and that list becomes big and unmanageable. And I can and honestly, I very rarely refer to the list. I
Hmm.
keep adding to the list every time I think of something, but I almost never read the list. And then it becomes a list of things I need to change. So I'll add all kinds of things as they occur to me, but I need to at least write it out before actually writing it in the book to have that's my outline. That's this happens and this happens and this happens. And so I find myself not needing expensive tools. I guess maybe they would help. Maybe they would be awesome, and I could write more than one book a year.
Yeah.
But I know what my process is, and it seems to work for me. And the ROI is really good on it.
Yeah, vision boards are interesting for me too. I just like I'll use a playlist, music playlist from time to time, just to get in a mood or a mindset. But I always find that that's worthless too once I start getting into it.
I always listen to movie soundtracks
Oh, there
every
you
time
go.
I write.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they can't have lyrics. No, I just can't do it. And I've listened to probably the Pirates of the Caribbean, basically Hans Zimmer stuff,
Yeah.
over and over and over. I don't really hear it anymore.
Yeah.
The Gladiator stuff I listen to a lot. Just it sets the right mood for me to puts my brain in that state that works well.
I found like I feel like I'm a smarter writer when I'm listening to like classical music or something that's like composer based. That's my mind tricking me, but because I'm writing the same way I write no matter what. But when I'm in classical, I feel like I'm smarter. So
Well, it's kind of the same thing. That's effectively what I'm listening to too,
yeah,
except the movie soundtracks are geared towards creating emotion.
yeah, yeah, that makes sense. I'm curious. Did you find it easier to go? As somebody who started in a presence, did you find it easier to go backwards or more forward?
Well, again, I blew up my world. I had no idea how I was going to move forward. So it was, to be honest, the way that Game of War came about. I was with a publisher, and that publisher, small press, was going to do a box set of novellas.
Uh
And
huh.
so I figured, okay, I will pick one of my characters, a popular character. I'll write a novella about it. It'll go in the box set. Become a USA Today best-selling author, and everything will be great. Well, I ended up not staying with that publisher. The box set never happened, and I realized I don't know how to write a novella. So it became a full-on prequel novel. That and I had been doing thinking about moving forward, and I realized none of that foundation had been set. And so I used Game of War to set the foundation so that I could work on House of Prophecy. And thank God I did, because I needed it. I had to do all that thinking to figure out where am I going to take things. And it's a much stronger book for having written Game of War.
Yeah, I remember you talking to me the last time about being stuck a little bit because you kind of wrote yourself into a corner with the ending.
I absolutely did. Yeah, I never thought that I would write another book and past that. I
Uh-huh.
thought, oh, I'm just gonna make everything that way. And honestly, again, that book I got a lot of feedback from from other people that I really respect, and some of their comments about how I ended that book um, made me make it not so happy,
Yeah.
and in doing so gave me the tools I needed to move forward. So I didn't do this, hey, everybody. I had, honestly, and again, for people who, I don't want to give too many spoilers, but Galen's father dies and his mother is kind of in a permanent coma at the end. And that wasn't the way I first ended it. I ended it with both of them being fine and happy. And someone read that and like, no, no, someone's got to pay for everything that happened. They made choices, and it can't be all happy at the end. And thank God I listened to him. I said, yeah, you know what, you're right, and I rewrote a lot because of that, and her being in that coma, basically being in the dreaming,
Mhm.
is the whole crux of the
Yeah.
next book.
Interesting. So how much further do you think you're going to take this? Do you have a game plan? Are you just going to roll with it until you feel like you've got it out of your system, or do you feel like you have a game plan now to go forward with the rest of the series?
I do. I don't know if I'll stick with it, but
Mm.
here's my game plan. I'm going to do one more book in the Chronicles of Chaos, and I believe it's going to be called The Realm of Gods. So that will be book 3. That'll make it a trilogy.
Mhm.
And then I want to go back and I want to finish Dantes' trilogy. So starting with Game of War, I want to do Game of War and then book 2 and book 3 of that, because people love Dantes. Even in, they're reading House of Prophecy, and he is a major character in it, but he's not the major character. And yet every review is like, Dantes is such a badass. People love Dantes. So I think I want to give him his own trilogy. After that, I think I kind of want to do another trilogy at the end.
Nice.
So I'll come back, and then something that moves off of this particular. I mean, might not even be Galen. It'll be, actually, I have a natural successor in House of Prophecy, and she is going to play a major role in the next book. And we need to get to know her a lot better.
Nice.
So we'll see, but that's kind of what I'm thinking right now.
Nice. So you're going to be in this world for quite a bit of time then.
Unless I need a new world to get like an agent, and
Uh-huh.
but for me, my own creative needs and all that, it fulfills that. I really like the world. I've done a lot of thinking. I mean, it took me 20 years to write that first book. I did a
Right.
lot of thinking about that world. I like it a lot. It's got a lot of drama baked in, and so to start from scratch, um, I could, but do I really want to?
Mhm.
Also, it's a lot easier to sell one person 10 books than 10 people one book.
Yeah. That is very true.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious how much like playing in Robert Jordan's sandbox and other sandboxes have led you to do you feel like that's given you the confidence to be in your own world, or what does it give you that you didn't, that you're now looking back on and going, you know what, if I hadn't done that, I would probably be this place.
So it's probably not the thing you think. I mean, obviously, I learned a lot. I read a lot. I was
Hmm.
more of a voracious reader back then than I am now. And so I was very exposed to a lot of different fantasy worlds.
Hmm.
Being able to work inside those worlds as a designer, it's like, as a professional designer, you need to be able to design within a box. And
Right.
so creatively having a world, and producing something, what I learned about that, and it's not just fantasy worlds, it's about any license. It's figuring out what people like about that world, and then producing that, and then giving them the thing they want.
Mhm.
And I did that, I think, with Wheel of Time, with Deathgate. I did it with Glee, honestly. So I mean, that was something that was a
Which is
sort of a,
probably a lot tougher world than people, with
yeah.
Robert Jordan versus Glee. I would imagine that they have, major similarities to one
You
another in terms of the fan.
so so in terms of the fan base, I would say probably the Star Trek people were the worst. They were the ones who they had their idea of what they wanted, and they didn't want anything else. One of them wanted a Star Trek in which everything was real time based, including travel times to where they needed to go. So if it was going to take you 3 days to get somewhere, they wanted it to take 3 days because they're a purist. I'm like, even the TV show doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
You wouldn't want to sit there for 3 days waiting for them to get somewhere. That's just stupid. That's not fun. And you need to deliver fun. So I lost my train of thought there.
Glee versus Robert Jordan fans.
Yeah. So every set of every audience likes certain things, and you have to protect that. You have to protect the things that they appreciate about it. And it's very different for very different audiences. Robert Jordan, those fans liked certain things, certain characters, didn't want to mess with those things. Yeah. Star Trek fans, they don't mess with their lore. Don't screw with that. Otherwise they will get up in your business like nobody's. Anyway, and then Glee fans, so I would say Glee was the only of those, at least those three, the only license that I had no exposure to going into. I'd never seen a show. I had no interest in it. I had no interest in making a game about it, but that was my assignment. So I started watching it, and I quickly, so as a game designer, you always have to find something to love in the license. Yeah. Otherwise, do not design that game. And because I've seen plenty of games that clearly came from people who didn't like the core property. So I
played those games. They suck.
Yeah, exactly. You can smell it a mile off. Yeah. And so for Glee, I started watching, and I realized that my love was in the writing and the music, and even then, eventually the characters. So I got into all those things, and I treated it with respect. And but I always need to make sure that I'm sort of handling those characters and I want to say character types the right way. Yeah. I included I included a story card in Glee that and it was an event that happened in the books, or in the show, but the way that it was worded implied that it was a man sort of shaming a woman. And I immediately got slammed from the audience. They are very, very sensitive to that sort of thing. And in looking back on it, they were absolutely right to react the way they did. I apologized for it. I got rid of the card and I swapped it out with something else. And so and they reacted really well to the change. So I'm not even sure what we're talking about at this point. But the thing I learned was respect your audience and have respect for the world that you're trying to give them. And so I learned all of that. And so when it came to writing my world, I thought, the biggest lesson, which has nothing to do with any of that, the biggest lesson that I got out of that was I knew that I was creating content at a level that was worthy of people's attention. And I think a lot of new authors don't have that. Yeah. So when it came to writing my first book, even though I still was nervous, everybody's nervous, I had already done it. I already put myself in front of people many, many times before that and had people tell me that they liked it. So I was like, here's a new thing. Do you like this too, maybe? But I was willing to do that. I was willing to give them that and let them react to it. Because I knew deep down, I think I can make good stuff. And so, and the result has been pretty good. I mean, I've gotten some awards on them now. People have reviewed them really well. So I had a leg up, and it's because I have made fantasy stories before.
Okay,
that was a long answer, dude. Whatever.
No, that was great. No, it was good. No, that was fascinating. So that leads me to the next question too, which is, be honest with me. Do you linger more on the positive aspects of what you accomplish versus the critical ones? Where do you what do you linger more on? Do you look at, because you are confident in your world and you have establishment, do you feel like the positive ones reinforce what you were going for more, or do you feel like the critical ones really give you pause and make you think more?
Well, I'm human. Like,
Yeah.
I can't get away from having an emotional reaction to like a bad review or whatever. Um, every review, every bad review that you get makes you question what did I do?
Mm,
Could I have made it better for this person? And the truth is, and for everybody who gets something like that, you're never going to please everybody, and
no.
it's just never going to happen. I actually, so Game of War has done really well. It's done well critically. It's done well with awards. But I sent it to a a blogger, a video blogger, and he's very excitable. I thought that's great. This guy gets invested in what he likes. I think he'll like this book. I think it'll be good because it'll get some exposure for the book. And he tweets to me as he's reading it. And he says, "I love this thing. It's great." And then I hear nothing for a while. And then he comes out, and I swear it's like I killed his dog.
Mm,
And it's because, and it's like it really happened, like he was really digging it. And then something happened in the book, and he took it personally. And
wow.
suddenly, it's like everything after that, it's like he didn't get invested in what's happening. It's like he started saying, my villain was cartoonish and, all sorts of tropes. And he was like really nailing me on that. And I realized it took me a while to understand that it really was, he got mad at me. He got mad at me for doing something to a character that he cared about.
Mm,
And it was like, that was crazy to me that somebody could get so invested in something and they have a way to retaliate about the person that did those things to somebody he cares about. And he took it. And I didn't. And for a while, it was like, what the hell? Do I suck that bad? Was the moment that bad? Because, it seemed to me like it was actually really important. And the way he handled it, the Dantes in this case, the way he handled it reinforced who he is,
mm.
and was very important to his character development. But man, I get it. It's no fun what happened to him, and I totally understand. But you kind of, as a reader, you kind of have to release control. You're in the story, but you're not driving the story, and it's not like the story is about you.
Mhm. I had a seminal moment like that with like Paul Atreides and the Dune series. There was a moment that
Mm,
I really felt like betrayed me a little bit, and so I totally relate to that idea.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and someone told me they were reading like Empire Strikes Back, and
Uh,
something in there made him throw the book against the wall, and he didn't finish it. He was so pissed. It took him years to get over it. So honestly, like, yeah, I guess I get it. I mean, or I should say, I understand that this is a thing. I
mhm.
don't really get it because I've never experienced that before. But
Yeah,
wow, I don't even know what to do with that information.
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I would say in one aspect it probably makes you feel more of like a writer. I would think you would be, it makes
Well,
you
I
feel.
really hated it when I got the review.
Well, yeah, sure.
It's like the only bad review, but
It
he's
sounds like in retrospect, you've marinated on that as well, and you've kind of come to, come to a moment where you feel like that's important, and it really resonated with you.
yeah. And honestly, I think I'm glad I did it the way I did. I
Mhm.
don't regret it. And if I affected him emotionally, then I accomplished my goal.
Yep.
So I'm sorry his experience was made less for it, but at least, I mean, hey, that's art.
Yep.
If I affected him emotionally, that's art.
That's all you can ask for, right? That's all you can do. Uh, all right. So the last question for you, Glenn, is give me one adjective you would use to describe your own series.
Um. Uh, that's really hard. I mean, yeah. I guess kind of want to say the first thing that comes to mind is not very good, but I'll say it anyway. It's creative. And the reason I say that is because it's about creation. So, people talk about chaos a lot of times in a very negative way. And the society is built to put that label on chaos because it's not good. Order hates chaos, and order controls everything. But chaos leads to change, and change is really necessary. You can't grow if you don't change. I mean, that's true for literature. It's not really worthwhile unless your characters are moving forward and changing. So creativity is kind of the core of my message. At least it is for the first book, and so in the others as well, but definitely A Child of Chaos. So I would start with creative, even though that's a horrible adjective to apply. But it's the first thing that came to mind.
Well, no, the way you explained it is beautiful. So that's awesome. I love that idea. Well, I really appreciate you kicking off our season here, and really awesome conversation as always, sir. Tell everybody a little bit where they can find your books and everything about you and all the things you're doing.
Great. Yeah, actually, I just did a couple of signings. I'm going to be doing another signing at the Barnes & Noble in Walnut Creek.
Nice.
This Sunday. I can't remember the time. Dang, I should know. It'll be that Sunday though, and hopefully it'll be on their calendar so you can just check it out. So if you want to know more about my books, you should go to mysterium.blog. That has pretty much everything about me. My signed books, there's a link there, but you can go to mysteriummerchandise.bigcartel.com, which I wouldn't expect anyone to remember. So just go to mysterium.blog and it'll lead you there. And now I actually just today shipped out House of Prophecy. I have both softcover and hardcover. So they are available while I have them in stock. And I will give you a free bookmark if you order. We got the new ones with all the awards and little things there. So definitely get it from me. I'm also on Amazon, and the audiobook for House of Prophecy should be available on Audible shortly. So yeah, give me a try.
Yeah, awesome. Everybody go check them out. I did put all the links. I put the blog link and the links to the books in the description. So everybody go check out what Glen's doing, and we'll be back this Friday actually with another episode of 21 Grams. So everybody, until then, it's always time to go indie now. Thank you so much.